Welcome back to Compassion Check-In. And today is week 7 and it's all about love. And we just had an unwelcome visitor to here. You know, the funny thing about life is this, isn't it? That very, very, very often, that despite your best efforts, we can easily become, if we're not careful, disheartened by what we see as a lack of love, right? Do you know what I mean? It's easy to get into that space, isn't it? It's a bit like the thing that I remember that Michelle Obama said like a couple of weeks ago, well, not a couple of weeks ago, but when she was saying, and I can't remember, I think it may have even been after the Obamas were out of office, that thing about when they go low, we go high. Often the challenge is, how is it that you show love? Even when what you see is a lack of love? How is it that you're able to show respect, even when you see what is a lack of respect? So for example, we just had a Zoom bomber before we started session 7 here on love. And I think it's kind of apt because sometimes it seems like this sweet things in the songs and so on, but the practice of love, to really show up with love every day when you don't see love, that's tough, right? That can be a huge challenge. So I wonder if anyone wants to pick up from there about that. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with that personally? How do you deal with that professionally? How do you deal with it? I mean, the thing that really jumps out to my mind was, I remember, and it was earlier this year, does everyone remember during the, here in the UK, there had been a lot of concerns during the wrap up of Brexit and post, and during the elections and so on. Do you remember that there had been then, when there was this whole issue about the proroguing of Parliament and whether it was fair or whether it was unfair had happened, there was a debate in the Commons on the first day back, and the debate became really, really heated. And really what was happening was people were saying, actually, the way that we treat each other is so unkind. It's so not fair. So there was this conversation, which was essentially about love and about respect. So I was just saying, welcome back to everybody. We're just saying that we'd had an unwelcome visitor, but I was just saying that actually in a way, it makes this conversation about love even more pronounced, because how do you show up with love when you've not experienced it? Who wants to kick us off? Rob, you are somebody I'm sure has been through all sorts of ups and downs and challenges and so on. What's your take on this? How is it that you show up with love, even when you don't see it, when you see disrespect, when you see people being discourteous? How do you deal with that?
Also, Rob, unmute yourself.
Oh, here. Yeah. So Rob, yeah, if you'll kick us off, I can see you're eating. So otherwise,
I'm not eating for any other reason than a level of comfort after what's just happened.
Yeah.
I may come off the call because I'm trying to persuade Frank to come back on the call.
He's here.
Oh, you are?
He's here.
Oh.
So we're over to you. So we're
I
over
didn't see his name. No, that's great. That's great. Well, I was just about to say, sorry, everyone. I was just about to say that Frank hadn't rejoined. I'm going to go and call him and I'll come off this call. But Frank, you're there. That's great. Fantastic. Okay, lots of love. Well, in the spirit of the check-in, and I hear what you say, Rash, about us dealing with things that happen, but what happened has impacted in different ways, and so I'm somewhat thrown by it, as I'm sure all of us are.
Yeah.
So yeah. we just come against that and pray against that. But in answer to your question, what I lean on whenever the word love comes up is what I understand from the scripture. It happens to be in the Holy Bible. I'm sure it's expressed in other faiths and may even be even more articulately so in other faiths. I'm not well versed enough, but certainly in the Holy Bible, in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, when it talks about love doesn't envy and love doesn't boast and love keeps no record of wrongs. Love is action. And I'm paraphrasing without necessarily reading exactly what the scripture says. But I was so moved by that it was the scripture that was read aloud by my wife's mum at our wedding 30 years ago next month. It is the fuel in our tank between myself and my wife Donna. It is a reminder that love is action. that love is manifest, that love isn't necessarily some of those other things that gets attributed as love, but is actually the extent to which we are able to humble ourselves oftentimes, but actually bring our true selves into any exchange and any transaction. And I'm just going to end my opening piece around this by saying I was so moved by verse 13 in that chapter that I ended up indelibly marking my skin, folks. My second tattoo, they're hardly tattoos really, because they're just a little bit of tech. They're like tatettes. They're not really tattoos. I managed to sneak this one by my mum because she said, Robert, you're gonna mark up your skin. but on this one, it has simply faith, hope, and love. I don't know if you can quite see that, everybody. Mm-hmm. Faith, hope, and love. And I've deliberately put the faith and hope so that I can read it the right way up, and the love is the other way round, because my intention is to try and offer my love out and into the world. And the final verse reads, and now we abide in faith, hope, and love. These three remain, and the greatest of these is love.
Yeah, you know, as you say that, there's a couple things that come to my mind. And I think of people who've demonstrated it in the most challenging situations. I think of Nelson Mandela. I think of Dr. Martin Luther King. And, you know, I was watching again just recently the film Selma, and to think, how is it that when you're also, you know, sometimes faced with, let's say, extreme brutality, let's say, how in those situations is it that you show up with love? I think about the story of Nelson Mandela, and I think I'm right in saying that, you know, if you can think about it, all the years in prison, 28 years in prison, and here is somebody who has so much compassion that he realizes actually in order to heal a country, which is what we're doing, that actually I'm going to make my deputy the person who headed up the party that's been responsible for my imprisonment. And as I understand it, it was that when, I can't remember if it was Botha or de Klerk, was very ill, who's by his bedside? Nelson Mandela. So there are those examples, isn't it, of those people who are able to show up with extreme levels of love. But one of the things that I observe is often very much in life, in our day-to-day life, we think, okay, I love this person. Think about even in relationships. I love this person so long as they behave how I expect them to behave. But the moment they do something we don't like, we question our love. But maybe love, that's not the nature of love. We've got to just hold firm to it regardless of what have you. Who wants to come in next? Anyone want to share? Because it's not easy, isn't it? It's not easy. And please, Susanna, please.
Oh, sorry, I just gone off. Yeah, no, Rasheed, did I miss? Did you talk a bit about what just happened?
We briefly spoke as some people were first coming on the line, and I set a little bit of context by saying, you know, we had, you know, somebody who'd stormed, you know, this Zoom bombed this particular call, and by saying that, you know how awful that was, and how it was kind of strangely apt with love, because very often what we experience isn't love. We might experience something that can be trauma, perhaps growing up. It could be trauma in a particular moment, and yet we're expected to continue to show up with love. And that can be a huge challenge. Maybe some people have experienced it personally, profession, the workplace, in so many different ways. So that was the kind of context we'd set, Susanna. So I'd welcome anything you want to.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just, you know, following on from that, it's like, I don't know about the rest of you guys, but particularly in a compassion check-in, and if we're talking about love, I mean, that as you said, Rash, that's just so horrific. Diametrically far from love. And I don't know about the rest of you guys, but for me, I mean, it's like, luckily, I have not been exposed to that. I found that really shocking. I found it terrible to see, and those images are still there. And you know, like when we're talking about compassion, it's like, I mean, it seems to me that there's a place just to a quick, you know, I don't know, you know, Rasheed, it's your things, but I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I'm kind of reeling from that. It seems I can't, you know, it's like I want to focus on the good things about love, but like I need a little bit of processing, so my heart will stop, and you know, just like a few minutes to I don't know where the rest of you guys are in that.
No, I'm glad you said that. I think it is good to be in that space. I mean, one of the things I wonder is I'd quite like to, you know what it prompts me to do? I'd quite like to do something that I've not done in these check-ins for a while, which I'd like to invite us to do, which is I'd like us to go on a little bit of a quiet inner meditation for healing and for peace. And that might be a way of just helping us to kind of come to a place of just letting that just pass and let that be. Is if everyone would be happy with that. Would everyone be happy with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd really like to invite us just to close our eyes and just to be with ourselves, just to be still, to be silent, to close our eyes, just to pause, breathe. And I want to invite you to perhaps just take a couple of deep breaths in, breathe in, just let go of any stress, to breathe in, to reoxygenize, hold the breath for a while, then let it out. And don't be afraid to make the breath out audible, breathing in deeply when you're ready. Hold, and then let it go. Let go of all of those thoughts or those emotions, any images, just let it all go. Just breathe it out, breathe it all out. Breathe in nice and deeply. Hold. And then when you're ready, just breathe it all out. Keep breathing in nice and deeply. Hold. And then let the breath out. I'm going to invite you to carry on, just taking those deep breaths in and out. If there's any thoughts, just let them go. Just let them just dissolve. Let them just float away as you're just being present with yourself. And just focusing on your breath, breathing in, and then breathing out. Letting go of any anxiety, any pain, any distress, any upset, any worries, any woes, just breathing it all out. Carrying on breathing in deeply. From our core, from our abdomen, really deeply. You might want to put your hand on the stomach, on the abdomen. Often we breathe shallowly, so hold it, breathe in deeply. Hold it, then breathe it all out. Expelling all of that, because we hold on to so much stuff in life. So much stuff. Breathing in. Holding. When you're ready, breathe it all out. And I just want you to turn the attention now away from your head. Take the attention to your toes, to your feet. Wiggle the feet around, be present. Often we're too busy in our heads, so we're turning our attention out to our feet. Being present with our feet. Being thankful for them for the work that they do, all the miles that they put in. Carry on breathing in deeply. And now we're going to turn our attention to our legs. Again, the walking that hold us up steady, move us around. Now we're going to turn attention to our abdomen or torso, the chest, the heart, the beating heart. If there's any tension, just let it be, let it go. Just enjoying the breathing and being and the reconnecting. And your attention now to your back, to your spine. Straightening the back now. The back, so much work, the backbone, keeping us strong, keeping us steady. Letting go of any tension. And now we're going to turn our attention to our neck and our head. Imagine as though there was a golden cord pulling us up straight from the ceiling, so we're stood nice and nicely, as though we've been doing Alexander technique, or if we were a ballet dancer or something. And now our arms and our hands, and let them be floppy and very, very relaxed, and just being present. And now, as we're here with our eyes closed, just best wishes just to everybody, anybody who's in pain or in distress right now, anyone who's going through difficulty with COVID-19 or just personally in their own lives, maybe they're going through difficulties, challenge personally, emotionally. It happens. Just wishing everybody every best wish. I'm wanting you now to just turn your attention to yourself and just wishing yourself well, remembering to take care of yourself, your health, your own well-being during these times of difficulty, these times of change, these times of uncertainty. And again, still focusing on your breath, really enjoying the breathing in, but also the expelling of the breath, letting go of the pain, letting go of the distress, letting go of the woes, letting go of all the people who may have upset us, letting go of all of that. And when you're ready, gently, slowly, in your own time, I'm going to invite us back into the here and now, into the room, just to be present, just to be still. And I just want to thank you very much for being here. And I want to thank you that despite the challenges before, for coming back here to this particular place. And what comes to my mind is that I think the one thing that I've learned about love is that I have a quote, and I was about to repost it today, is that everything boils down to love and compassion, or its absence. I think the thing I've learned on this journey is that absolutely everything boils down to that. We're either being loving and kind to ourselves, to the next person, or we're not. And I've come to learn quite recently that the times when I find myself irritated or annoyed by people, that the times where I'm able to find just that extra cup of love, things just shift. Do you know what I mean? Because very often people are hurting, and often they're not able to say. And maybe we've experienced that in our own lives, in our growing up. You know, those people who we've met, those people who are bullies at school, those people perhaps in our families, those people who we've known, you know, those people who are so afraid that it comes across as hate and pain, but actually they're hurting deeply. So it's quite funny, that thing about love, you know. Anyone want to share? Dr. Martin, I want to turn to you, my friend.
On a everyday basis, one of the things I think that I'm conscious of is the idea of the myth of love, and then there is the fact of love. And what popular narrative fiction does is to construct the myth of love. So it's the television programs, it's the films that we see, it's the theatre that's created, it's the songs that are written. What we hear about in those songs so often is the myth of love, because it uses romance and romanticism to call us in, to invite us in, to listen and to empathize. But I think one of the things that becomes all the more clear in my mind is that it is not so much the words that one hears about the myth of love, it is the feeling that you get from being in someone's company or looking at them, and you can see their truth. You can feel when someone is not connected to you. You can also sense when you've lost a connection with them. That's something that's wired in us, which I think makes the human spirit so distinctly humane. And when we feel that the connection is not there, we strive to do something about it. And if it's with people that you respect and care for, you make a concerted effort to build the bridge and make the connection. And if it's just superficial, you know, you say, well, maybe she tries harder and he tries harder and I try harder, we can eventually get there. But love, I've always believed, is something that you've actually got to consciously work at, which is why I've always believed that romance is far more powerful than sex. Because to be the romantic, to be someone who understands the meaning of romance, it means that you have to be conscious of what your wife or girlfriend, husband or boyfriend is like, what your children is like. You have to consciously be aware of the things that make somebody happy, and you have to mirror that, reiterate that, demonstrate that, and show that. And when you do, I found that people really get a powerful sense of your consciousness of their own being.
I love that. You know, Martin, I love that theme. The thing that jumped out to me was that thing about that needs to be worked at, and that difference between the idea of it and the reality of it, and that how you feel it. You know, when you've really been loved, and it can sometimes be really small. During this COVID-19 thing, my brother-in-law and my sister, there was a point where I was self-isolating for a while, you know, just as a precaution. And I'd asked for some of I may have said this before, but some of my mum's famous jollof rice. And they came by with not just that, but they came by with all of these foods and they needn't have. And I just felt this deep sense of that love, of that connectivity, of that care. And it wasn't about the food, it was about the thought. It was that somebody had been so kind. But I wonder, you know, sometimes it's difficult. Frank, you've got your hand up. Please, over to you, Frank. Yeah, Frank, please.
Unmute, Frank.
Yeah, you'll just need to unmute, my friend, Frank.
I'm still a bit shaky. I just wanted to present a juxtaposition to Dr. Martin's premise about love having to be worked at. For me, the example that graphically springs to mind is I was there when my son was born. I went to great lengths to make sure I wasn't, but my wife insisted that I be there. And I remember it graphically because the whole experience happened very quickly. From labour to him putting in the parents was less than 50 minutes.
Wow.
But the point I'm trying to make is that before that 50 minutes, there wasn't anybody there. After the 50 minutes, there was. And the minute he put in an appearance, my immediate love for him was off the scale. You know, it just materialized from absolutely nowhere. And it was a feeling of sheer unbridled emotion that I don't think I have experienced the equal in my life to date. So I'm just saying, so for me, I'm not disagreeing with the fact that it has to be worked, because because for example, if you're in a marriage, it has to be worked. But I'm just saying, for me, that example of being present when he put in an appearance, for me, that just came from nowhere, and there was no work, because I had nothing to reference that against. I wasn't a parent, so we just got the one. But from nowhere, this feeling of you would lay down your life, you would do anything for this person that you don't even know.
I'm just going to add to what you're saying, Frank. Is that the feeling didn't come from nowhere. From the moment your wife told you that she was pregnant, the psychological shift in your mind was taking place. So from the point of conception to the point of where your son came into this world, you had been psychologically, and if we think of Freud's conscious and unconscious and so on, you had been psychologically adjusting yourself to the fact that life was coming. So it didn't come from nowhere, it was in you, it is in you. And that's the thing that keeps you going, I'll just say this before I shut up. When someone, if your wife, your girlfriend, your husband, your boyfriend says to you, has to say, don't you love me? Something's gone wrong. If you're doing it, if it's happening, if it's tangible, and so often, I remember when I was married, there is an incredible sense of joy just getting up and going to work, and you have to do the things that you have to do. And, all these were many years ago, and the work really didn't that wasn't the meaning of my life. But knowing that I had someone who loved me, that was the meaning of my life. And I had come away from so many dreadful hardships as a child. So when somebody else loved me, that was the absolute reconstruction of my psyche about what my life is and what somebody else's life is and what life is. And so something extraordinary happens when you know that you are loved, and then you consciously work towards showing whoever loves you that, you know, this isn't going anywhere, this is going to you, your impact on me, and this is how I feel about you. So that interconnection is there.
Something's jumping out to me here with this thing about love, which is, you know, so we've talked about when it's just there. I loved how you spoke, Frank, there about that moment at the birth and this just love just pouring out. And Dr. Martin, you're talking about that time that sometimes needs to be put in to really foster and nurture that love. What happened? Isn't it interesting that sometimes we can't talk about love without talking about what would seem to be its opposite, hate, to what happens when the love is gone? So something I just want to touch on. I remember as a kid, I love music, and I always loved the title of that Supreme song, Where Did Our Love Go? And that title resonated with me. I thought the title was so powerful. You know, where did our love go is so relevant, isn't it? It's relevant often on a personal level. It's often on a global level between countries and so on. And I wonder, does sometimes that time when love is so close and so dear sometimes create another barrier over here with the people who aren't near and close to us? I wonder if anyone's got any thoughts on that, because then we often find it harder, isn't it? What is it about this thing that sometimes makes it so difficult for us to love, or we want to just hold these people dear and push these people over there? Anyone got any thoughts on that? Because love sometimes can be very tough, and we see it often even in relationships. People who were madly in love and they can't, and then suddenly that you can't get them in the same room. I wonder if anyone's got any thoughts. Mavella, you've always got rich things to say. Mavella, can I just invite you in here? What's your thoughts on the conversation so far?
Sure. I mean, when everyone's been talking, I've been listening to kind of different viewpoints and picking up different nuances out of them. But the thing for me, when we said last week we were going to talk about love, what comes to mind for me first and foremost is loving yourself. And I think if we don't get that part right, that's when it becomes difficult in relationship with others. And also, Dr. Martin just talked about how someone else's articulation of love for you can sometimes help you to kind of be able to express love to them. But I think conversely, you can come from the most loving home and loving environment and still feel unloved, and then articulate going forward a lack of love for others, and that comes down to the lack of love for yourself. I'm learning as an adult has to come from somewhere other than what your parents put into you, because there are many people whose parents love them dearly and still are very deeply unhappy and still have no idea of how to articulate this because they haven't learned to love themselves. And I think that's, when we talk about love, we have to have that conversation about love of ourselves first and foremost, where that comes from, how we nurture that, so that we can then take that forward to other people and other relationships. And just to touch on what you talked about earlier on, I wasn't on the call in the beginning because I was on another call, so I missed whatever it was that happened. But you'd asked the question about how we continue to love in the face of hatred or displeasing behavior. And for me, I think that comes from a strong sense of the love of self. Because when you love yourself, it means that you know what you're worth, you know what you bring to the table, you know what you can give to others. And there's a comfort in that you use when people come at you with negativity. It's hard for people to hurt you when you love yourself.
Mavelle, I'm so glad you said that. I think one of the things that I've learned, particularly over the last year, is that where I found myself in situations, and the situations that I find most difficult, right? And where I'm thinking, well, why don't people see this and what have you, where I feel as we need to work extra hard. I've realized that it's so important for me to show up with more love. I've realized that self-love is so important that I've got that room. I love the phrase that's been resonating in my head recently is that thing, when people say, can you find the room in your heart? And for me, this gets to the core of it. If you've not got room in your heart, first of all, for yourself and for anyone else, then it's not going to happen. So with situations like the awful situation which happened earlier, which was awful, it was terrible, but also around the world, there are things that are even worse, unimaginable. Maybe some people know them here. unless we have that room in our heart, there's no way that as a species we can heal. And so this is why, for me, with compassion check-in, the two essentials is for our compassion to rise and our consciousness also. Iris, can I bring you in at this particular point? Because in some of the past compassion check-ins, you've talked about, last time we were talking about belonging, you've talked about in the past and going to different places and not belonging. And so what's your take on this thing about love? Because I bet you've had quite a large experience of it. When you see it, when you don't see it, what's your take? And then we've had this theme about self-love also. What would you like to share?
Well, actually, I think that Novel touched upon the point that I was thinking when we're talking about love, because love has many faces, isn't it? Mm. So for me, it's just like when I talk about love and relationships, when I think about my family, for example, we were not brought up to show love the way that I see many other families. We are not exactly the huggy type, but we know that we love each other because we are always there for each other when we need to. If one cut, break the nail, the other 10 siblings know about that, and we ring to find out if it's painful, knowing that's painful. So we want to share the pain, and I think that is a bit of love, wanting to share the pain of others. When I think about love in the society as well, and here in the UK, I mean, for me, who adopted this country as my country, in the last few years as well, I had to exercise a lot of love, I think, and a lot of people that I know had to do the same, to be able to be in the same room and talk to people that were talking about things that you think, well, how can you think that? How can you not see the whole thing? And I'm talking about Brexit, for example. And then when I think in my own country at the moment, Brazil, you have to have a lot of patience. So love for me is more to do with patience. And in relationship as well. So if you love someone, you find patience. And if you don't, which is my strategy, just give some time for yourself, just to build up your own love. Because most of the time that I cannot find love for others is because I hate whatever they are doing in myself. I find that I do that, even though, perhaps I control that on my own behavior.
I love that, what you're saying there. I want to bring in Alexandra at this particular point. Alexandra, am I right? You're a yoga teacher. Am I right? Alexandra, I would imagine that lots of people are drawn to yoga for all sorts of reasons, but sometimes people are drawn to things like yoga because they suddenly realize they have to wake up to love. It might be for self-love, it might well be for all sorts of other reasons. I'd like to know your take on love, because yoga is far more about just the physical and body. It's an invitation for us to really be at one with ourselves and life itself and this whole experience we find ourselves in. I wonder what your thoughts are on the conversation we're having today on love.
First of all, I'm very emotional, so forgive me for that. I'm just, I don't know why other people come to yoga. I mean, many come for different reasons. But I came to yoga because of the similar situations like what happened today earlier. Like I started doing yoga myself in war-torn Croatia because I just could not relate to the hatred and terrible things that were happening. And like Rob said before, I mean, love, it's an action. So it's like love has to be in action. And I just saw terrible things, crime happening. And I was a journalist at that time, and I had to write about all of that. And so I started like really going inside, as Movel also mentioned, and Iris, like you have to work on your own love and capacity to love no matter what is happening. Because people do terrible things because they haven't experienced love. They don't think they're worthy of love. So sometimes people come to yoga for that, just to reconnect the body and the mind and find that connection works for them in their personal time and tempo and space. And yeah, everybody works on different level, but that was my experience.
Alexandra, I want to thank you so deeply for sharing what you shared, because I think what you just shared is profound. It's what this compassion check-in is all about. I wonder, had it not been for the awful thing that happened before, which people are watching this thinking, what happened, like something in a soap or a show that you didn't see. If we had got to this depth of understanding why love is essential, I think that sometimes unless we've known pain, unless we've known hurt, unless we've known loss, we don't know how essential it is. How, you know, because sometimes, and I think Dr. Martin started us with this, sometimes we think, oh, it's just this fluffy thing. When I first went on this, I guess, journey of finding self, I thought, okay, it'll be nice. I just knew I had to go on it, but I didn't know what I would find. I had no idea of realizing the power that love has, the power that compassion that it has, and that therefore we find room to be more loving. And that's what this is all about. So I think it's really profound, the conversation that's now unfolding. So as awful as what happened was before, I wonder if we would have got there without that. Lorna, can I invite you back in? And I want to invite Mia and Robin in, and Susanna back in, certainly before we wrap up. Lorna, your take on this. It's been a really rich conversation already. Lorna, anything you want to share?
Yeah, I don't know if you guys, if I'm sounding, you guys sounding very Dalek-y.
Oh yeah, you are sounding a bit Dalek-y.
Like my internet is a bit unstable at the moment, so if I sound like a Dalek, you know, this is
have to type it in. Lorna, you might possibly need to type it in, which is a shame. You might need to type it in because you are a bit Dalek-y. But can you say
whether I should jump out and then come back in, or just get something else?
Rasheed, it might help if Lorna disconnects her video.
Yeah, try and
just have more bandwidth.
And then, yeah, it might be that, and then we might be able to hear you. Whilst you're doing what, yeah, let's and have a go at that, and then we'll bring you back in. Then I want to bring in Mia Morris. So Lorna, have a go. Aha, let's bring in Mia Morris in the meantime. Mia Morris, are you there, or are you off having a coffee break?
You caught me. Afternoon, everyone. How are you doing?
Afternoon.
Right, what was the question?
Yeah, love.
Okay. Oh, what is it?
Well, what
I'm
is
still
it?
trying
And
to work
also,
it out.
the conversation, I mean, Mia, the conversation's been that, I mean, we happen to have, unfortunately, a Zoom bomber sharing inappropriate messages, and it then, from there, made us realize that love isn't always easy. We then had a conversation about when it emerges straight away, sometimes perhaps the birth of a child, sometimes it needs to be worked out on a relationship. Alexandra was then sharing powerfully how she saw things that were just so far from love, you know, so much difficulty, pain in war-torn Croatia, and then going on this journey of love. Mavelle was talking about finding that self-love. Robert shared some powerful passages about love. So anything you want to say here about love?
Love is here. It's forever present, basically, and we have to seek it.
I love that. I love that. I just love that. I couldn't agree with you more. I love that. Robin, can I bring you in there? And I'm going to bring Susanna back in. And let me see if I can. I'm going to try and get Darren back in also.
Hello.
Yeah, Robin, hi. How are you doing, my friend?
Good afternoon. How is everybody doing?
We're really good. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, no, I was gonna agree on some points about self-love, because I'm only starting to realize at age 22 how important that is. Because often or not, you get so caught up in a lot of things these days. So I think having, like you always say, is by backing up yourself, you know that you have yourself. Like, it's just you and nobody else. So that, I think that comes first for anything that you approach in life. So
well, you know what, I wish that I'd found that at 22, and Melville point that I wish I'd found that at 22. I really wish. You're a wise man, my friend. You're a very very wise man.
I just wish, you know, in previous, like, I was just thinking, if we were taught this back in primary school, like, you know, when you're a little toddler, you know, I think everyone would be so like strong in oneself, you know. And you know, that's what I think. Sorry, if that makes sense.
It makes so much sense. Susanna, can I bring you back in here? Anything more you want to share? And I want to thank you for inviting us to take that time to really pause and to really to reflect and reconnect, because it's it's made this session especially rich.
Oh, yeah, well, thanks, Rasheed, for doing that little, you know, the meditation. Certainly for me, that was really, really helpful. And then I'm really glad that actually that we managed to reclaim the space, because the whole conversation is just very healing, just listening to people talk, and it's, you know, it's just very nourishing and boosting in the way that, you know, seeing those things, they just take the floor away from under you. And I don't know about the rest of you, for me, I certainly become very confused, and then it's just very important to put those foundations back in. And you know, this is just such a rich look at different aspects of love, you know, Ravel, self-love, and you know, and the birth of your son, your romantic love. And I loved what I think it was Dr. Martin, I think it was what you said about connection, because I think for me that is the you know, it's like a really, really strong thing that for me governs lots of different types of love. So I just say a very brief personal word here, that at the moment during this time of COVID-19, we're whatever, we're with my parents-in-law, so we're living with them, and that's quite complicated because you know, we've got lots of different generations, and so you know, the thing of connection and working in it, and patience as well, that I think, I can't remember, it was it that Iris said, and you know, and talked a bit about family connection and that sense of duty as well, and patience, and you know, love coming from all sorts of places and opportunities to show love. It's like, for me, I'm having a lot to think about here. So it was great just hearing everybody's different reflections and thoughts about different types of love, because it's all sort of being mushed together here at the moment.
Something to you, Susanna. You know, the point that you have just made is incredibly, it's almost like an intersection, because everyone, Movell, Alexandra, Rob, everyone's point reminds us that the myth of love, it tends to simplify and to create a sort of generic idea about what love is. But as living, thinking, critically aware people who have a spiritual connection with whatever your faith may be, you will know that love is far more complex than that. It is something that is not just individual. It is something where it has kinship, it has propinquity, it has all sorts of intersecting layers where we understand every single person who is on the screen in front of me at the moment. I am hearing about the meaning of love through all of you, and there is not an invalid voice or comment amongst any of you. You're all saying what is the, it's as though each one of you have touched a facet of the whole thing. But the facet has so many different colors and so many different shapes and sizes and so on. We have to remember that love is not the simplified, mythic, romantic image that we're being fed through a popular global cultural narrative. It is the personal experience that you feel when you know someone cares about you and respects you and understands how to work with you and how to be with you. And I really feel the energy from you, Susanna and Alexandra, everything that's being said, right down to Frank's profound moment of seeing the birth of his own son. So I know I talk too much, but I really had to say that.
I love that. And I want to bring in Rob again in a second, but I want to just feedback on something that Alexandra, you'd said. I think, Alexandra, just a thought, and this is just one of those things that from my work that, and from seeing you on these sessions and other sessions, please, 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 I think with the work that you're doing, you must share, there's something about why you do the work you do now that's so profound, that for me straight away would mean that you would be the person I would select. So there's something here about your own journey that is so powerful and so profound that invites people onto this journey of love. Rob, I want to ask you something very briefly, just as we're heading toward the close. Rob, for a long time you worked large part of the career, huge career civil servant, a long period of time in the Ministry of Justice. And I know, and it's apt because you're somebody for whom equality and justice is very, very dear to your heart. Rob, how have you combined work, I don't want to say fighting for, working for something that's really important, often when there isn't love, when there isn't, how have you managed to stay kind, compassionate and support? What are your tips there? How does one do that? Because for me, that's where the work is. For me, I think the important invitation for us all is that we need to work harder on it. My attention was just turned to sending healing thoughts to whoever was the Zoom bomber. The healing thoughts for them. And for anybody who sometimes, because that is really important on this journey. So I wonder if you've got any thoughts about that. How does one continue to show up with love, not get disheartened, and continue to do that work? I'd love any thoughts from your experience. Oh, you'll just need to unmute.
Still not with that discipline. Similar to my brother Frank, I'm still a bit shaken, like all of us, I guess. And I hear the emotion in what we're sharing, and I send my love through the screen and embrace you all. I think what comes to mind, Rash, you've referenced my career there, and you've referenced the longevity of it. And I think on that journey, which has been a long one, and on certain days it doesn't feel long, by the way, and certain days it feels like it's just been a couple of days. I mean, it's been a wonderful journey in and of itself. But from my time as a court clerk, listening to divorce petitions, domestic violence, family disputes, in my time as a trustee with Relate, listening to abuse, both child abuse and domestic abuse between adults. In my time working as a recruitment officer and a grievance counsellor, listening to individuals who, as you mentioned earlier, Rash, having on one occasion demonstrated their apparent love for one another by way of marriage and ceremony, then end up saying they can't even be in the same room. They've got to hear evidence on separate days or separate moments. And knowing that, and I get this from my dad, bless his soul, that often the way in which I manage some of what comes at me is to reach for humor and to find some kind of joke in a given situation or something to generate laughter. But like you, Rash, my immediate thought as I pulled the lid down with what I did see, but when I pulled the lid down to shut my eyes, my immediate thought was to contact. My immediate thought was Frank. I know and have worked alongside Frank for a while lately, and I know that Frank has worked his way through a lot of stuff, and I just wanted to make sure he was okay. Frank had called me, and so there was something of a reciprocal action, love-orientated action going on there. But I think with one eye on the clock, I think what my heart wants to say is this, and I read it, and I can't remember where I read it, and maybe someone on the call here has read it too, but I read that in my experience and my journey, human kindness is often merely equal to human wickedness. And it is we that must tip the balance. We must tip the balance. You know, I believe that I am a son of a living God. I believe that. I love myself. I love myself. I do. I believe I'm here for a purpose, and God gives me the sat-nav. God brings me here to this compassion check-in. God brings me to my next meeting. God will enable and empower. God loves me and I love God back. It is reciprocal. I am forever married to my potential. My most important relationship is with a living God. It is with a living God, because through that, all other things flow. And I know that without God in my life, I'm stuck. But through that relationship, all things are possible, all of them. And I must tip the balance. I must tip the balance. If I can help, I must help. If I can reach out, I will reach out. If I can be and offer a compass through my experience, and in that receive from others, the greatest love of all, the greatest gift of all is loving myself in order to love others. And that's why I love what Marvell shared, and love her to the bone. And that's why I love being in the company of those that are invested in offering the healing for this world. And at no time like now do we need that. We need to address the virus within the virus. That's what this pandemic has shone a light on. We need to work at that together and demonstrate our love in action.
So wherever it emanates from, whether it's something that comes up in that moment of birth of a child, love, whether it's something that we've discovered along the way through pain, through disappointment, whether it is something that we've discovered through the relationship of relating to others, whether it is something that for us emerges through our relationship with God, our maker, with life itself, through meditation, through nature, through whatever it is, there's something that we find that it's really important that I love that thing about that tipping the balance and that responsibility that we all have with love. I just want to thank you all so much. I'm going to have to run off this call quicker today because I've got to facilitate a call which I think Rob is also on, about response to COVID-19. Can I just say something to you all? I just want to, first of all, my apologies again for what happened today. But then after that, what I don't want to apologize is for how richly, that then took us to somewhere very, very powerful and very profound, to reconnect to this thing about why it's really important that we show up with love. And it reminds me that what I take away from this call is remembering that every single activity, everything that I do, every conversation that I have with anybody, any piece of work that I do, it's really important that love's poured into it. And it's important, it's worthy of it. Absolutely everybody I meet is worthy of my time, of my attention, of my care. So thank you all very much for that. I want to just thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here today. And I hope to see you all next time. Well, we can be joined, next time, by the way, is National Staff Networks Day. So our theme, we can be joined by loads and loads of people from all over. Our theme is around networks, contacts, relationships, as we've all become a network. Yeah. So thank you so much, everybody. Take really, really good care. Lots of love to you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.